When this came out, the hysteria over the clit scissors scene was all I heard about. And when I watched the film, that was the least shocking thing for me. That scene with the crow in the foxhole and Defoe beating on it, trying to get it to die, that reminded me of an anxiety dream I've had, like a deja vu from my own emotions. It's comforting when someone else's darkness mirrors your own. Lars is brave with how intimate he is in his films. He goes off and says things that get him in trouble, and his bravery gets overshadowed. Those are words from director Anna Lily Amarpour on Lars von Trier's 2009 film Antichrist. Seeing Faces in Movies is a podcast where each month I focus on the works of a different director or cinematographer. And each week I invite a guest on to discuss film and the artist's filmography. I'm your host, Felicia, and today we're talking about Antichrist. So a very quick synopsis of the film is a grieving couple retreat to their cabin in the woods, hoping to repair their broken hearts and troubled marriage. But nature takes its course and things go from bad to worse. Tagline for the film is, "Nature is Satan's church." The film stars Willem Dafoe as he, Charlotte Gainsbourg as she, and Storm Sahlstrom as Nick. It's written by Lars von Trier, cinematography by Anthony Don Mantle, directed by Lars von Trier, edited by Anders Refn and Asa Mausberg, music by Christian Ednes Andersen, costumes by Frauke Furl, and special effects by Fabian Grabholz and Dennis Kron. Today, my guest is Ben Vargas, one of the co-hosts of Cinema Shit Show, a podcast I highly recommend, not just because I've been on it twice. It's also a very good show.
I don't know about very good.
No, it is. You guys are covering great films, stuff that like you probably have never heard of, and then when you watch it, you're like, whether you like it or not, you're always kind of grateful to have watched the film because it's an expansion of different types of film from different areas in the world. So I appreciate that. And you've been on this show twice before as well to talk about Woman in the Dunes and Winter Light. And now we're talking about Antichrist.
Yeah, which is very different compared to the other two.
I would say so. But thank you so much for coming back on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Like I said, we're talking about Antichrist. I'm curious what your relationship is to this director and this movie, but specifically the director as his work.
He's always been one of my favorite directors. I am going to blank when I'm trying to think of what was the movement that he was part of?
Dogma 95.
Yeah, the Dogma 95. So I was very into that whole movement and the directors surrounding it, and tried to watch as many of those films as I could. A lot of them were hard to find, so had to download them or whatever, but I just found it so fascinating, the idea, and honestly, like, it kind of is like the most pure form in a way, because it's just, there's no lighting, no real like music, or it's almost like a play basically, but on screen, in a way. But huge fan of that whole little group that they had going. So
I like Vinterberg stuff too. I think even with the direction they both gone in, quite different, but I definitely appreciated both of their works.
Oh yeah, The Celebration is like one of my favorite movies of all time. So
we kind of chatted just before we pressed record about this movie, whether it's something you can like, or it might be a film that is not enjoyable necessarily, but you can have an appreciation for it or not. And my guess is we both do. So we can get into the first segment of the show and just talk about our personal thoughts on the film and Lars's touch on this specific story that he wrote and directed. This is first part in his Depression trilogy, which is followed by Melancholia and the Nymphomaniac movies. And essentially what he was doing was kind of working through a depressive part of his life. And he created these 3 sets of films that are very different, but they explore a lot of the same themes, which we'll talk about as we go through this. But wondering how you feel, if you knew that this was part of kind of an unwritten trilogy, and how that fits. And if you've seen those other two films, which we will talk about actually in the second segment, but how you feel about him working through his kind of personal turmoils through something like this.
Yeah, I actually did not know this was part of a trilogy when I saw it. But I mean, I think that it was, I don't know, brave maybe to, put your depression on screen for everybody to see. Like, I think that at the time that was probably a little bit ahead of its time. I feel like now, that wouldn't be as looked at as, revolutionary in a way, but like I don't think that that was something back then that a lot of people were really doing. And he's obviously a very controversial figure in film, but I've always really enjoyed just how raw everything is with him. And but yeah, I mean, for somebody who's dealt with depression, anxiety, myself, it's nice to see people that you appreciate, on a artistic level, being honest about something like that, because I think sometimes we get very in our heads that like we're the only ones that's going through this right now. And so just to like hear other people talk about it, I think is really healthy. So yeah, I this movie kind of wrecked me the first time I watched it, and I don't even have children. I can't
Yeah.
imagine watching this movie as a parent, because this has to be probably the worst thing that could possibly happen. Maybe even above losing partner or spouse, or
Mhm.
because you're not supposed to bury your children.
Yeah.
And so, especially in the situation that it was, like, I think that the guilt that they feel, or at least she feels, not to say it's their fault, but I would understand them feeling guilty, because they were doing something that was,
Mhm.
strictly, for pleasure. And, to like not be hearing, they at one point he shows a shot of the baby monitor
Yeah.
and it's going off. And, so again, I think that the guilt that they have, or she has, is understandable, not putting blame on them, but it's understandable that they would feel that way, right?
Exactly.
When was the first time you watched this?
This was the first time.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. I don't think I would have picked this if I would have known.
No, I was gonna watch it anyway for this series.
Oh god, I'm so sorry.
No, it's okay because you know what? If this had been the first one I was recording, it might have been tough, but I'd already been like so deep in
Mm,
rewatching all of his other stuff or catching
yeah,
up on stuff I hadn't seen.
yeah.
So it wasn't too bad. I don't know why I hadn't watched this before. And
Mhm,
I think with directors you like, there's always kind of one that you hold off on for whatever reason.
mhm,
And big part of wanting to do this series was because I was like, okay, I need to finally watch it. So,
right.
um, it has like a reputation, obviously, for being pretty intense. And watching it, obviously, that first scene that you're talking about, the first section of the film, is dark, but
Mhm.
it's shot in a very beautiful way, you
Oh,
know?
yeah, which is crazy because it's obviously such a terrible scene, but he does film it in a way where, it's like a Greek tragedy almost, right? Like,
Exactly, exactly
yeah,
that.
and I love that, you know, I mean, obviously there's spoilers, so when the baby is falling and she is like screaming out in passion at the same time as, this baby is falling, and it's pretty amazing because there's parts where she looks like she's almost crying or in pain.
Mhm.
And so it's very fitting, that
Yeah.
these two things are going on simultaneously. And also, I mean, again, we're not gonna get too deep into it, but I think that you can also almost take that scene as like okay, so, they're having sex, and which means they could be procreating while their other baby is dying, right? So it's like
Yeah.
full circle of humanity, right? Like pain, pleasure, life, death, all in like that one little shot, I just think it's brilliant. It's possibly one of my favorite scenes of anything he's done because it's just so all encompassing. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
It's there's so much to it, but yeah, it's pretty incredible.
No, it is. And it's something I definitely want to expand on in the third segment also, just of like the visual kind of flourishes that are in this movie that we do end up seeing later because like you mentioned, he originated his career in creating like this Dogma 95 movement
Mm,
and it was just very bare bones and this is not obviously, so it's him evolving as an artist.
mm,
And if you look at this side by side with something like Europa, it's they're very different. But it's very beautifully shot. It does set up the film well enough, I guess, because I think starting off a movie with a child dying is being like, okay, this is not going to be an easy movie to watch.
right.
Um, but for most of it, and like we've already prefaced this and we've agreed as your two co-hosts for today, saying this to the audience, that we are not going to attempt to get into what the meaning is behind all of this. We're just trying to talk about Lars's work on this film. I think there's plenty of other podcasts who would do that a lot better, so I'd highly recommend seeking that out. But something I did want to talk about because when you read a lot about this film and the criticisms of it and the reaction after it was premiered at Cannes Film Festival is it misogynistic? Now that's obviously I think some things can be fairly objectively a certain way and I think there are other things that are subjective. So I think this film, if you view it that way, that's fair.
Mhm,
And if you don't, I think it's also fair. I don't,
mm,
and I think I can see why people would think that because it is aggressive, and especially if you're looking at his past work and his use of women. And I've talked about this with other guests, how he likes to work through his emotions through his women characters versus the men who are always just kind of either vile people or kind of like the boring voice of reason. He feels more comfortable expressing himself through the women, and that's what we see here. But that doesn't mean that, it's not valid that people might think that. Now, I'm not asking you if you think it is or not, more so if you could see the argument for both sides as it stands for this film and his broader career, because it's not just this film, he's been accused of that.
yeah, I mean, I think that yes, he's always been accused of being misogynistic, or at least his, films are.
Hmm.
I personally have never seen it that way. I think that it's like you said, like the male characters are a lot of times are just kind of there, almost like in the background in a way. Like they're usually not like super. They're not like the main focus of the films. And, so, like, I actually think the kind of the opposite, but yeah, I can see the argument.
I agree. And it's not just because I like his work, or I'm trying to defend him because I'm not going to be defending Lars von Trier.
No.
I'm just not
No,
going
I'm
to.
not either.
But like as the artist, I think that he, for some reason, feels more comfortable expressing himself through women, and I think that it's not misogynistic. At least I don't read it that way.
I think maybe the problem is that most male directors don't do that, and
Hmm.
so maybe people think that, like, a male shouldn't be making that decision, maybe like he and almost like I guess the argument would be like he's speaking for women, and because a lot of his films are very controversial, or have a lot of insane stuff in them, that like I don't think he's like in any way saying like women are evil, or you know what I mean, like
Hmm.
I just think that that's what he feels comfortable doing, and so I don't personally have any qualms about that.
And I think there's a great scene in this where he, aka Willem Dafoe's character, discovers some stuff that she studies or whatever that she's written and her thoughts on women being evil and him questioning that. So I think that's also how Lars thinks in that way of he knows that how people view him and that people are going to read it a certain way, but I don't think he is like that. Yeah, I think that he gives these women too much complexities for it to be hateful, I think.
Right. Yeah, and I also think that he likes to genuinely just fuck with his audience.
That especially.
Yeah. So for me, I think that he relishes the fact that people are talking about him in any light. And I think that he likes leaning into, like the racist stuff or the misogynistic stuff because I don't think he is. And so I think that he just kind of likes to just mess with people. Like,
Mhm.
oh, okay, sure. Like, I'll just throw this in here because I know you're gonna think it anyway. So why not just, make it a joke kind of thing? You know what I mean?
Yep. Another director I've been talking about a lot in the series, and not just because I've done a series on him, but I think their works are quite similar and they get compared quite often is Hanukkah.
Uh huh.
And his exploration of women is somewhat similar to Lars's exploration. He's giving these women these main character roles, and a lot of stuff is happening to them. And yes, it's heightened in both of their films, but I think it's very interesting for men to be exploring that because, like you said, a lot of men don't want to. They're like, I can't relate to women that way, so I'm not going to try and write something more complex for them or something that just seems human.
Right.
Um, so it's a balance.
Which to me, doesn't that, I mean, I almost feel like the thought of like, I can't relate to women, so I'm not going to write a strong character.
Hmm.
That almost feels to me worse than somebody who's going to take a female character and kind of, give them that strong role that most people wouldn't. So like, I don't know. Like I
I
said,
agree.
I've never felt that way about his stuff. So, but again, I can understand why. So like,
Mhm.
sure, it's
Yeah.
open to interpretation.
Yep. I agree. Like most of his work. So I
Yeah.
definitely think it's worse to not even bother trying to, or even just saying that you don't understand women. It's like, well, you've not made the effort, obviously. So
Right. Well, right, exactly.
do you remember now what I was going to say? Was that because it was in my notes? Prior to watching this movie, if you've heard anything about it, it's how kind of intense it is. As you're watching this film, it's very quiet for like a good chunk of it. It's like two grieving people, and the grief is manifesting in very different ways with these two people. And it's mostly about two parents trying to grapple with the fact that they have lost their child. So the batshit stuff that does happen really doesn't happen until the last, I don't know, what is it, 20, 30 minutes
Yeah.
of this film. And yes, it is very intense. And yes, as much as I knew it was going to be batshit, it didn't really prepare me for what I was seeing. But I think with a lot of his films or films like this, those type of scenes overshadow the rest. Because I was like, this is a very smart and well thought out film, and people only talk about. I get it because there are a lot. But I wonder how you feel about how this is mostly just a kind of chamber piece between two people before the chaos happens and how well those two actors work together, like Charlotte Gainsbourg and Willem Dafoe.
Yeah. I mean, I think on my original watch, I wasn't very impressed with Defoe. I felt like he was just hollow and distant and, you know, um, just kind of like he comes off very, I think like he's trying to help her, but it feels very like controlling. Like he's like trying to get her, like to get through the stages and kind, you know what I mean? Because he's a therapist, right? So like
Yeah. Hmm.
it doesn't feel loving to me in any way. It just feels very like doctor patient
Hmm.
relationship type. And I've always felt that like he was just kind of there, but now watching it again, I actually think that like his performance is pretty great because I think that that's actually pretty hard to do to play that type of character across from her who's very intense. And I mean, I'm a huge Charlotte Gainsbourg fan, so like this was a must watch for me even if he didn't direct it. And I think this is one of her best performances she's ever done. So yeah, watching it the second time around, I actually am more impressed with Defoe than I
Mhm.
was the first time. And as far as all of the, graphic stuff, watching it this time around, I actually was not as greatly affected by it as I was the first time. I actually feel like nowadays, I don't know that it would be as controversial as it was 15 years ago. I mean, especially, maybe I'm just, numb to it, desensitized because I watch so much horror.
Mhm.
But again, the first time you watch it, I didn't know anything about it because it had just come out. So that was very shocking because I wasn't expecting it. But now watching it this time, it was not nearly as insane as it was the first time around. So I do think that it's a disservice to the film, though, because it's really not the most important, parts in this movie. So,
It definitely isn't, and I was kind of shocked because again, this being the first time, at how well the story was crafted and leading you to that point. And like the last part, yeah, there's some shocking scenes. To be honest, it didn't again, and maybe I also am desensitized. There's probably only one scene that I was like, okay, that's actually gross. And that was like the penis ejaculating blood. I
oh,
was like,
yes.
I was like, oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't
It's pretty.
really that image is stuck in me. Everything else, I'm like, or when he's kind of bashing in the head of that bird creature thing, I was like,
Mm-hmm.
"Oh, that's rough."
I mean, honestly, I think the thing that affected me the most in this movie is all of the times where I don't know how to, I don't know what words to use because he clearly was not, in at least some of them, was not interested in having
Oh,
sex.
yes. Mhm,
And I felt that those scenes were actually the most troubling for me to watch
mhm.
because they felt extremely real. Sex is not portrayed that way in 99% of films.
No.
And especially with the woman being the aggressor.
Mhm.
Um and I mean, not to like get into too much detail, but I have been in that situation before. And, I think that like no matter how I say this, it's gonna come across the wrong way. I think that
Okay.
like for a lot of men are afraid to come out and say when these types of things happen because people will just say, well, that can't happen.
Yeah.
And so, like, being in that position myself, like, it does happen, and, it's something that and honestly, I think the only reason why I'm saying it is because, like, I again, like, with the whole, Lars talking about his own depression, I think it's important to talk about these things because, I'm sure it's happened to somebody who's listening to this, and I think that it's important to, like, understand that, hey, this stuff does happen, and, I found those scenes to be the most troubling because they were filmed in such a way that, most sex scenes are very staged and,
Yeah.
these are very I mean, they look real to me, and
They
I
do.
I don't think
Yes.
they were, but they definitely come across that way, and so that to me is more troubling than the violent stuff and,
Mhm.
'cause again, I think in a way I think that's, just him again trying to get some shock value and get people talking
Mhm.
about it, and I think that's the scene actually where isn't that the scene where, people felt like it was misogynistic? Was that stuff?
I don't know, I think there was a mix of things. I feel
Mm,
like the self-mutilation towards the end also they thought
mm,
was
mhm,
misogynistic.
mm,
Everyone has their own kind of scene, I think,
yeah,
or people who think that the film is misogynistic
right,
that, triggered them, I guess, in some sort of way.
yeah,
Again, totally valid. Um, but yeah, I agree. I think those more intimate scenes between them, whether it's that or just kind of the flashbacks with the kid. There's a scene
mm,
with the shoes and the kid's crying, and she's obviously just like not really paying attention because her mind is elsewhere. Those are hard to watch, and then they are harder to watch than the stuff that's after because it is more of him just being, I'm going to shock you with this And I think it's smart to not have the entire film be like that because it would be, it just wouldn't work. So I think the more personal stuff between the two makes a lot more sense and makes the film worthwhile. I don't know that it makes it easy to rewatch. I don't know when I will rewatch this. It definitely won't be anytime soon,
Yeah.
but I can appreciate his writing and his story crafting. That's for sure.
Mm.
We're gonna still talk about the story and stuff as we go on, but especially as we get into the third segment. But I just want to quickly move to the second segment and just talk about what he did right before and after this, just to give the audience a bit of context of where his career was at this point. So we
Mhm.
mentioned he started off doing his own Dogma 95 stuff. At this point in 2009, he has moved past it, or is it just about to? I think this is kind of like the really big tip where he starts to shift. But technically, what he does right before this are two separate things that I do want to mention. So in 2007, he makes a short film in the anthology film called To Each His Own Cinema, and it's commissioned by the Cannes Film Festival. And there's a collection of like 34 short films by like a huge amount of directors that people know, each of them just being 3 minutes in length. His was called Occupations. He plays himself and he's berating and violently hammering a loudmouth businessman to death during the premiere of Mandalay. So that's
Wow.
funny. I haven't
I
seen
have
it.
not seen that. No, I have not.
It's hard. I've been wanting to find this anthology for years, and I
Um,
think they never. It's been there's like a DVD copy somewhere, or it's
mhm.
like someone has released a DVD copy, but they've never released it since, and it's kind of hard to find. So I'm hoping to watch it. If you look at like his filmography, where it's listed, you would see something in 2010. And I mentioned this in a previous episode, but this is a film called Dimension. Technically, it's unfinished. Well, not technically, it is unfinished. There's only 27 minutes of footage that was released in 2010. That's why it's listed under that. But it was started in 1990, and he had planned to shoot little bits over a course of like 33 years, and it was supposed to actually be released in 2024. But in 2002, he kind of lost interest because a lot of the actors he had been working with had passed on. So he decided not to do it, but it was supposed to be like a crime film. I guess there's
Oh.
27 minutes out there for
Hmm.
people to watch, but
Mhm.
he abandoned that. So that's what he has listed right before Antichrist. And what he does right after it is Melancholia. So that's 2011, second part of the Depression series. And you can see those visually look somewhat similar. With the visual flourishes and the mix of handheld. I don't know that there's handheld really in Antichrist. So there's very minimal amount compared to his other films, but that's where he's moving towards. I think, at least
Mhm.
for me, I don't know how you feel. I think Antichrist is like him starting a new chapter.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. This was yeah. I mean, as somebody who is again the whole dogma thing. This was almost kind of shocking, just because it was so different, and the visuals. This movie, I would watch this movie on silent with no subtitles because it's just so visual. It's so visually just absolutely gorgeous, and I think the guy who did this, I think he won an Oscar for Slumdog Millionaire, I think. I'd have to
Oh,
look it up,
really?
but he did Slumdog Millionaire. He did 127 Hours, which also
Mm,
is beautiful. So the guy obviously knows what he's doing. If I watched this, I'm not sure I would know this was a large film if I didn't know, if you didn't
yep.
tell me.
Yeah. I'm looking up his stuff, and he'd worked with Lars before that, and Thomas Vinterberg, because he did Dear Wendy, did Mandalay, Dogville. I guess he won the Oscar for Slumdog right before this, because that's 2008, so it's so funny.
Yeah.
A nice
Yeah,
shift.
which is like a very different movie.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I mean, it's pretty cool. He worked with Danny Boyle and Lars.
No, he's got a great filmography of
Yeah.
stuff. I didn't recognize his name, but I've seen a lot of these movies, so that's
Yeah.
really cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the second segment, just to give people a little reference of what he's done. But we can move to the third segment, just trademarks. And we've already kind of talked about some of this stuff and just our personal thoughts, but we can expand on some stuff that we wanted to expand on. One of the things that I wanted to chat about was kind of the running theme, especially throughout this depression series that he made, was like the idea of therapy and therapists. And because you kind of talked about Willem's character in this and how he is kind of just playing her doctor and she accuses him of that and not being able to express his emotion. And if you can watch it that way, you can watch it as him allowing her to express herself and not overwhelming her with his feelings. But then there's like a disconnect between them. The way he kind of portrays therapy or the voice of reason in his films is interesting. I talked with Jean Marie actually about Melancholia and the idea that maybe he has some sort of disdain for therapists, and because he's mentioned that he's had a hard time with them and has gone through so many. And I think it shows in his films. Wondering how you feel about his portrayal of therapy and how he portrays the people who are supposed to be the voice of reason within the chaos of those characters.
I mean, he definitely does not portray therapists in a good light in this film. I personally have done therapy in the past. I also have had issues with multiple therapists. And so it's not that I don't think therapy is good, because I do think it's good, but I also would lean more towards his view of it than the other side. And again, for me personally, I know that a lot of people do a lot of really good work with a therapist. I personally have done a lot of very intentional work with like mushrooms. And so I've actually worked through some like really, really big stuff doing that with, a trusted person. And so there are different avenues. I would never talk somebody out of therapy. I think that whatever works for you, because really it's just about you, right? Like it doesn't really
Exactly.
matter what my opinion, your opinion. It's if it works for you, do it. And I think that like if you're not doing something to grow and work through trauma and things, then, that's probably a mistake. Just like raw dogging life is probably not like the best thing. Again, I probably would lean more towards how he feels, because I kind of always felt like I was just talking into the void, which maybe, I mean, for some people that's could be,
Yeah.
good because they're just getting it out, right? Like,
I agree. I mean, I also have had some tricky issues in the past and would also not talk anyone out of it, and maybe something I would explore again in the future. But right now, not so much. And I think for him, who knows, maybe he did find someone that fits, but I think his therapy really is his filmmaking. He seems to be getting it out through this, which is good. I think that's healthy to create art instead of,
yeah.
doing something worse.
No, for sure. Art is very therapeutic. I've actually, over the years, done different art things, and I always feel, even doing the podcast, I tell Nix all the time, nobody listens to us. I would still do it because for me, just having some like creative outlet is really, really important. So
Yeah,
I don't want to say I rely on it, but it's definitely very important to me. So
that's
I
good.
think do something. Don't just sit in your feelings. Like talk. Do mushrooms, do ketamine, like whatever it is. Like do something. Like try different things, see what works for you. But yeah, like I definitely understand where he's coming from, at least.
Yes, I wholeheartedly understand, and I also agree. You definitely need to do something, whatever that works for you, as long as you're not hurting anyone else or
Right.
yourself, then we're all good.
Yeah.
So, but speaking of, I think that's a good segue to one of the next points I want to talk about. Kind of still on that wave of the way people deal with their emotions and their depression. My assumption is you have seen Melancholia and the Nymphomaniac movies.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So the way depression and like mania kind of manifests itself within these characters is quite different. And I'd say Melancholia is probably the one that most people can relate to.
Hmm.
But then there's probably parts of Nymphomaniac and Antichrist that people also can relate to. They probably haven't been as heightened, but they, maybe their mind has gone there in those parts. I'm wondering how you kind of feel, again, specifically because these are women that he's expressing himself through, like the parallels between the way he expresses that through them, because it's different in those ones, but then we see it almost throughout all of his career, like, in Dogville and Dancer in the Dark, Breaking the Waves. These are all people and women who are experiencing a darkness of some sorts, but it manifests itself in different ways. Wondering how you feel about the exploration of that through this film.
I think that, they're all kind of one and the same, right? Because depression and trauma and healing, and it's not linear, there's not
Mhm.
like a start finish. We go through waves. And I think that, we can go through moments of anxiety. He shows, I think, one of like the better visions of like what anxiety looks like. And I think like, the
Mhm.
whole physical aspect of it, because that for me is like a very big thing. I have certain things that I do when I'm anxious. And so like seeing that on the big screen was pretty cool because people don't typically show that. But then, I mean, there's no wrong or right way to like like when you're depressed, different levels of like how we get through it and how we react to different things. And so, the hypersexuality of, Nymphomaniac,
Mhm.
that's a real thing. I mean, it's something that we're basically just, we're trying to ignore or replace our, negative thoughts with something that, feels good. And so like he's really just showing like all the different stages and like ways that like, and, maybe it's personal. All of them are personally him, like, I don't know. But I just think it's like kind of showing like the full spectrum of how people react to depression and anxiety. And
I think, like you said, it doesn't get often portrayed that way, or it's kind of just like someone sad and crying for a certain amount of time, which is also, people experience that. But I think anyone who's experienced depression, myself included, quite often it isn't always the same way. There are certain tics that are reoccurring, but sometimes it manifests itself in very different ways, and I like that he is working through that throughout his work and being open and honest about it and really kind of just laying himself bare, because for him to be exploring this for, I don't know, over a few decades means that he is a highly emotional person and intelligent enough to know that he does need to process it in a certain way. So I think that's good.
yeah.
Um,
Well, yeah, and I think again, I think that, seeing these things really makes a big difference because I think when these things are happening, we all think we're the only one, like we're freaks, you know what I mean? Like this is only happening to me, which is really an insane thought to have, but like we actually, I think in the moment we actually believe that.
yes, 100%.
Like nobody else is feeling this. Like
Yeah.
but and again, in the same light, no one is actually going through this because it is personal. So like there is actually like a truth on both sides of that, right? Like in the moment, you are the only person going through it. The people around you are almost really helpless. Like the character that's displayed in this movie, like I've had partners who have tried to help me and it's like there really is nothing that you can do. Like
Yeah.
yes, you can do things to like soothe me or like try and distract me or whatever, but in that moment you really are dealing with it and it is like a unique situation. So there is like a line of flat. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
so the Defoe being betrayed kind of as like helpless, he kind of is helpless, like he really might be doing his best.
I think so. I think he definitely thinks he is, and I don't know what else you could do other than get upset with her, and that's not gonna help either. So,
Oh no, that's like the worst.
exactly. You kinda just have to be, and maybe he was a little too passive because,
Right.
that resulted in, his demise, but, I guess it was inevitable for that character.
Yeah.
Um, I think even the way he wrote Willem's character is probably the more sympathetic time that he's portrayed a therapist. He doesn't seem to hate this character as much as maybe he has for other voices of reasons in his films. So
Mhm.
one of the last things I wanted to bring up or pass it over to you for whatever we missed was just kind of, and we've already kind of talked about this. I didn't mention his name. The cinematographer is Anthony Mantle, and the cleaner appearance that we have here. But not just the cleaner appearance, there's kind of an element, and we see it in Melancholia as well, of sort of fantasy that's being
Mhm.
added to these films, which
Mhm.
definitely is not part of his other ones. Maybe there's a bit in like kind of Europa, and then we see it later on in something like The House That Jack Built. There are
Oh,
fantasy
yeah.
elements in that as well. But like you mentioned that you were shocked just kind of watching this for the first time because it is a shock, especially if you've been following his career and that shift. Just kind of your thoughts on the way it's used here because it's not a lot of it. There's just like little flourishes here. Like I'm thinking of one, not even just like the scene of where the child's dying, but there's one where she kind of like blends into the grass where she's lying down because Willem's character is like a voiceover of working her through her anxiety and become one with nature, which I think is essentially kind of the metaphor for the whole film. But wondering how you feel about just the visual flourishes that he starts in this film and continues until now, essentially.
I think that he really did a great job of showing visuals of the things that are inside our heads. Like I talked about him showing how anxiety actually works with like the physical manifestations, the racing heart, or, the,
Hmm.
uncontrollable, like, your limbs or your fingers, or move. And I think him showing those things is like Defoe is trying to like guide her to get through these things. And like I think that he's basically just showing us like a visual of like what he's trying to get her to see in her mind. I think it's like the obvious that like he truly is like this is therapy for him. He's
Hmm.
like doing this as much for the story as he is actually doing it for himself. And so
Yeah.
like I just think that like I think it's one of the better visual films for anxiety and depression, because he's not just I'll bring up when I do like the pairing and stuff, like, this is not the typical way that grief or depression is shown. And so like I think he's just like adding that visual element to it. But I mean, I'm a big fan. I think it works really well. It's like the mind of the like a look into like the mind of madness, basically.
Hmm.
Like we didn't talk about it, but like there's like the scene where Defoe sees the young deer in the
Yes.
grass. Was that like showing like his son, basically, like because it's dying or dead, or
That's a good point. And I wonder what like the significance is of deers because I feel like
Mhm.
every animal has like a, you know,
Yeah.
significance. And I wonder if that's what that is.
Well, because like he looks and it's like all beautiful and he's all happy, and then like the camera pans over to the back end and there's like it's dead or it's dying. And
Yeah.
I wonder if that was like just like him seeing like some physical manifestation of his son. I don't know. Again, I just think that like Lars did a really good job of showing things that we don't normally see. And
Mhm.
a lot of times directors will do like narration, or
Yeah.
they just show people sad or crying or drinking or doing drugs. And again, this is very different than most of the movies he made before this. He's really leaning into like the fantasy part of that. And I don't know. For me, it works really well. So
I think so too. I think maybe where he was at, that's how it felt for him. And sometimes you can't explain how you feel. So that's probably a good way of visualizing it
yeah,
for people.
yeah.
Um, so I think it's really well done. And I think it adds for like value for, eventual rewatches for people because it's so much that you can't take in everything on a first watch. I know for a fact I didn't take in everything, and there's something new I'll take in each time I do rewatch it. It's extremely complex and layered film.
And all of his work is really like that. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you could watch his movie 10 times and every time you're gonna pick up on something different, I feel like.
100%. Are there parts of the story or just like things that he explores often that we haven't chatted about that you want to expand on?
I don't think so. I think we've talked about a lot of, I mean, obviously had a long career, but I think we've talked about a lot of the things that, he's
Yeah.
he likes to explore, so.
I feel like this is probably a good place to cap it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we're going to spiral.
Oh, no, we
I
could
like these
spiral from
characters.
here.
So I'll leave that to someone else to make an entire series on Antichrist. I'm sure
Mm.
someone would love to attempt that.
It will not be me.
Yeah, it absolutely will not be me. I actually don't think I could sit with this movie for that long for my own mental health sake. I have one more question for you. That's a double
Okay.
bill. And I know this is probably, I don't know, I had a kind of a difficult time thinking of something, but then something came in my head last minute. What would you pair this with if you're making a double bill? If you have one or more picks, feel free to give them, but I'm curious to hear what you would pair this with and why.
So I'm gonna do my own depression trilogy.
Okay, nice.
And they're all gonna be about child loss. Um
Mm-hmm.
so I'm gonna start with Rabbit Hole,
Mm-hmm.
which I love.
Yeah,
And
that one's good.
I'm going to start with Rabbit Hole, and then I'm going to do Antichrist in the middle, and
Mhm.
then I'm gonna end it up with a very much more realistic and not like fantasy side of the trilogy, and it's gonna be Manchester by the Sea. So that way you can just completely fall apart by the end of it.
I mean, yes, you have to be a very strong person, either a strong person or like kind of an insane person if it doesn't affect you in any sort of way.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I did think about Manchester by the Sea, but I was like, those are both heavy in such a different way.
Hmm.
Those would be great. Those are all really great films. Rabbit Hole, I don't think gets the recognition that it deserves. People kind of just forgot about it for some reason.
Yeah, and I don't get it because Nicole Kidman is just so great.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's weird. Like, I feel like some filmmakers, when they start a career, John Cameron Mitchell, you almost get pigeonholed, right? And I think that for some people, they look at the movie and they're like, well, is John Cameron Mitchell the person that should be making this film? It's like,
Yeah.
it's like he's a filmmaker, like everything doesn't have to be punk rock and, you know what I'm saying? Like subculture, like
Yes.
he's a filmmaker, like, and so I
Well,
think that it was
exactly.
just so different than anything else that he had done that I think people just kind of gloss over it or don't even bother watching it, and I mean, I love Short Bus, and I also love Hedwig and the Angry Inch, and so I just think that, you know, I think it just kinda got lost because it was like, "Oh, the guy who did Short Bus and and Hedwig made this, like, movie about, a couple grieving a child." Like, people just don't even bother. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I don't understand that. Like you said, he's a filmmaker and an artist. Just because he likes to explore punk things, you think those people don't have emotions or haven't
Mhm.
experienced something similar? Loss, but it doesn't have to be loss of a child. It could be just loss in general.
Mhm.
So that makes no sense. I forgot that he directed that also. So it really didn't have any effect on who directed it. I
Yeah.
don't think anyone could have directed. But his work is good. I'm just saying that.
Right. No, I know. I'm just saying, like, it's kind of it's I have seen that a lot over the many years I've been watching movies and being on Twitter for the last, I don't know, 12 to
Yeah.
14 years or whatever it's been. People, and it happens in music. You have a sound and then you try and change that sound, and everybody's like, "You're not allowed to do that." And it's like, wait, like you don't own the band, you don't pay their bills. Well, I mean, I guess technically, but you know what I mean? Like, you're not in charge of like their creative outlet. And so like I've never really understood that. And maybe that happened with, Lars, a lot of the like crazy Dogma fans, which, I was one of them, but I also know that not everything lasts forever. And, I was a little disappointed that it didn't go further than it did, but I also know that people move on and they do different things. And so, yeah, I think if you're listening to this, watch Rabbit Hole.
Oh yeah, that's the final the final say. But also just like last thing that I'll say about that is, yeah, people complain if people change, but then if people don't change, they also complain. If they're like they're just doing
Right,
this,
yeah.
it's just like you can't win.
No.
So
Yeah. That's why you just do whatever makes you happy and that's it.
literally that, just say fuck you guys.
Yeah.
I'm just
Yep.
gonna do my own thing. But someone who was saying a big fuck you, I think, to people is what I paired mine with. And I kind of we didn't really talk about the satanic stuff of this because I think that's too complex to even get into. But I, for some reason, held on to that part of this story and thought of pairing it with Ken Russell's The Devils. I think if you want something that explores that in a different light and a little further, in an also very dramatic way, I would say it's a very heightened film. You could do those. I think The Devils is a lot less depressing and heavy. It's heavy in a way that it's like thematically heavy, but I didn't feel depressed after watching it. At least I didn't. I was just like, wow, this is wild. So if you want something that's also crazy, you could go that way.
Do people feel depressed after watching Devils? The Devils?
I don't know. Maybe.
I
I don't think so.
I didn't. I mean, I've seen it and I was not depressed by it.
I don't think so. I don't think any of his movies are really depressing, to be honest.
No.
So if you don't want to be as depressed,
Right.
then you could go that route, I would say. So, good slew of movies for the audience. Check out if you haven't already. Definitely add those to your watch list because you're going to have I was going to say good time, but that's probably not the best word. You'll have an interesting time. Something to write about in your diary.
If you want to cry and get some emotions out,
then we've got a set of movies for you.
Yeah.
Holidays are coming up.
Yes.
So why not?
Yeah. I mean, I cried during the holidays anyways, so
I mean, yeah.
At least watch something.
Those.
At least watch a good movie while doing it.
Exactly. Fun. Yeah. Well, Ben, thank you so much for bringing this movie forward. And I say that genuinely. Thank you for talking to me about it and being on the same page of just let's talk about his work on this film because I think it's important. People can get into the mythology behind it. And not that it doesn't matter, but I think it's important to talk about the filmmaker as it relates to their work. So I appreciate you coming on and doing that with me.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you having me on. Can't wait to have you on mine again soon.
Please, I'm waiting. Seeing Faces in Movies is an official podcast of the Royal Film Club. It's hosted and edited by Felicia with intro music by Lamar Watson. If you liked what you heard, let us know on seeingfacesandmovies.com or send us an email at seeingfacesandmovies@gmail.com. While you're at it, please subscribe and rate the show wherever you listen to your podcast. This is our last episode in the Lars von Trier series. If you've listened to one episode, thank you. If you've listened to all 4, thank you. Thanks for joining for any of them, and stay tuned for the announcement of our next director of installments. Watch more movies, and we'll see you very soon.